In early February 2025, the first executive order signed by Trump after taking office was to announce a 10% tariff on all goods imported from China to the United States. However, you may think that the matter is over, but it is not. In March 2025, the United States announced a further escalation of its tariff policy on China and officially implemented new measures. From now on, all goods from China will be subject to an additional 10% tariff. This means that the 10% tariff that has already been imposed has now become a total of 20%. However, what is even more shocking is that within less than a minute after the United States announced this tariff policy, China quickly issued a notice announcing that it would impose a 10% to 15% tariff on some imports from the United States. These goods are mainly agricultural products such as meat, wheat, corn, and soybeans. What's more interesting is that the next day, China issued a series of notices to include 10 American companies in the unreliable entity list and 15 American companies in the export control list. In the following video, I will analyze for you what impact this series of sanctions from the United States will have on China, and what kind of losses will China's countermeasures cause the United States to suffer. If you like our video content, please click to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can receive all our latest video content. Now, let's get into today's topic. As early as 2018, the trade war between the United States and China had entered a white-hot stage. At that time, the Trump administration began to impose large-scale tariff sanctions on Chinese goods on the grounds of intellectual property infringement. At that time, the United States also imposed tariffs on Chinese goods worth $50 billion and imposed strict restrictions on Chinese companies' investment in the United States. Then, based on the results of the 301 investigation, the U.S. Trade Representative prepared a list involving about 1,300 tariff items with a total value of $50 billion and announced additional tariffs. In August 2018, the United States once again imposed a 25% tariff on $16 billion worth of Chinese goods, and China quickly responded with retaliatory tariffs of the same amount. However, during that period, China's trade surplus fell for 2 consecutive years, from nearly $600 billion to about $350 billion. Therefore, to some extent, China was at a disadvantage in this trade war at that time. Now that Trump is in office again, he will naturally not stop the trade war. In February 2025, Trump announced a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods exported to the United States. It is worth noting that the United States has also begun to increase tariffs on Chinese battery products. The original 3.4% basic tariff, plus the 25% Section 301 tariff on energy storage batteries implemented in 2026, means that the cumulative tariff on Chinese battery products will reach 38.4%. In addition to battery products, Trump's 10% tariff this time also led to a sharp increase in China's photovoltaic product tariffs, up to 60%, covering solar cells, silicon wafers, polysilicon, and other related products. It was generally believed that after the United States imposed this series of sanctions on China, it would take at least half a year before a new sanctions order was issued again. After all, the United States had just experienced a change of government, and the economic and political situation was still unstable. But to everyone's surprise, in just less than a month, the United States once again imposed a new sanctions order on China. So what happened? In early March this year, the Trump administration announced that a new decree to impose a 10% tariff on goods originating from China would officially take effect. This is the second time this year that the United States has increased tariffs after imposing a 10% tariff on China in February, and the cumulative increase has reached 20%. Coupled with the 25% tariff previously implemented through the 301 investigation, the highest comprehensive tariff rate for Chinese exports to the United States has soared to 45%. Steel products face punitive tariffs of up to to 70% due to the superposition of multiple clauses. At the same time, Trump also announced a more tough policy starting in April. The United States will implement the so-called reciprocal tariffs. Simply put, the United States will in turn charge the same tax rate on the goods of these countries as other countries charge on American goods. In fact, Trump said at the beginning of his term that he would impose tariffs of 60% to 100% on China. Therefore, it is not difficult to see that Trump has already planned to start a second-round confrontation with China. In fact, he also fulfilled this promise after taking office, but he slightly lowered the tone when implementing it, reducing the tariff rate from the initial 60% 100% to 10%. Trump's team said that this move is intended to warn China and try to force China to make concessions in fentanyl cooperation, economic and trade issues, and security. It can be said that the last 10% tariff was not actually the end, but the starting point of pressure. It is worth noting that after experiencing the trade war during Trump's first term, China seems to have been fully prepared. At the same time as the United States announced a new round of sanctions, China almost immediately retaliated. At 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time on March 4th, Trump's decision to impose a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods exported to the United States officially came into effect. At 1:01 p.m. Beijing time on the same day, China also announced its own countermeasures, which were almost simultaneously introduced. According to the announcement released by the Ministry of Commerce of China, China's countermeasures mainly include three contents. First, a 10% to 15% tariff will be imposed on some imported goods originating from the United States, including chicken, wheat, corn, cotton, sorghum, soybeans, beef, and other agricultural products. In addition, the second measure is that China will include 15 U.S. entities in the export control list, prohibiting the export of dual-use items to these companies, and all ongoing export activities will be stopped immediately. If there are special circumstances, the relevant companies need to submit export applications to the Ministry of Commerce of China. The third one is more severe. China announced that 10 U.S. companies will be blacklisted. Companies on the blacklist will completely cut off economic and trade exchanges with China, which can be said to be completely blocked. At the same time, China's tough measures have also made many third-party countries begin to rethink whether they need to adjust their cooperative relationship with the United States. It is worth noting that on the second day after China announced the sanctions, many experts pointed out through analysis that the Trump administration may face anger from former supporters. So, what is going on behind this? In fact, these analyses are not without basis. First, China's move to impose tariffs on U.S. agricultural products directly targets 3 U.S. companies among the world's major grain trading giants. It is worth mentioning that these 4 companies control almost 80% of the world's grain trade. That is, the United States holds more than half of the global grain market share. For many years, China has been an important customer in the U.S. grain market. As we all know, China is not only one of the most populous countries in the world, but also one of the countries with the largest grain consumption. According to statistics from the General Administration of Customs of China, in 2023, China's grain imports reached 162 million tons, an increase of 11.7% year-on-year, second only to the historical record set in 2021. In 2024, China's grain imports have reached 170 million tons. According to relevant data, China's dependence on the United States for grain imports once exceeded 70%. From the above information, you may think that after China sanctions U.S. grain, the Chinese will face a crisis of food shortage or even hunger, but this is not the case. Although China has been importing grain from the United States, as early as 2020, China's grain imports have begun to shift to other countries and regions, such as Russia and Brazil. More importantly, in 2023, China and Russia signed the largest food supply agreement in history. According to the agreement, China will import up to 70 million tons of agricultural products, such as grains, beans, and wheat from Russia in the next 12 years, with a total contract value of about 25.7 billion US dollars. This means that China has long been fully prepared to abandon the US market. In contrast, the United States will not only lose China, a huge food importer, but also this loss is almost irreparable. It is worth mentioning that most of the votes Trump was able to win in the general election came from agricultural states, and the United States happens to be the world's largest exporter of corn. This time, China's attack on U.S. agricultural products has not only curbed the most competitive U.S. export commodities, but may also affect Trump supporters in agricultural states to a certain extent. Analysts believe that if Trump wants to quell the dissatisfaction of American farmers, he needs to invest at least $30 billion US dollars to subsidize agricultural practitioners who have suffered losses in this tariff war. As for China's second and third sanctions, they can actually be discussed together. These 15 and 10 U.S. entities listed on the export control list and unreliable entity list are directly or indirectly related to the U.S. military industry. Some companies provide products, such as drones. Others provide services, such as satellite monitoring. For these 15 U.S. entities listed on the export control list, China prohibits its domestic companies from exporting related products to them. However, this does not mean a complete ban. If there are special circumstances, the relevant companies can still apply for export licenses from the Ministry of Commerce. The U.S. export restrictions on China are similar. U.S. companies can export certain products to Chinese companies listed on the entity list by applying for export licenses from the U.S. Department of Commerce. It is worth noting that the reason for China's imposition of tariffs on U.S. products is that the United States has imposed an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods on the grounds of the fentanyl issue. China believes that this move by the United States has not only damaged the multilateral trading system, increased the burden on U.S. companies and consumers, but also undermined the basis for economic and trade cooperation between the two countries. Judging from the timing of China's countermeasures and the targeted nature of the measures, it is clear that China has long been prepared to retaliate and is just waiting for Trump's tariff decision to be officially implemented. So, who do you think will win in the new round of Sino-US sanctions? To not miss out on our future projects and news updates, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We will continue to provide you with more exciting and interesting content.